For 4 years now, Penelope has put out a special blend of whiskey for cancer. This is the FCancer barrel strength version. They do both a barrel strength and non-barrel strength version. Previous years, this has been a bottle that has been fairly highly sought after. I got kind of lucky and was able to pick one up out of the most recent sales of this through Shared Pour. Let's talk a little bit about what makes it interesting, and then we'll get into 2 Minute Tuesday and do a full review of the Penelope FCancer version for 2025. The proceeds of this go to supporting cancer research and things like that. This is done in collaboration with Take, who's a pretty well-known whiskey reviewer. He's done a number of very, very popular picks. But the thing that makes this kind of interesting for Penelope is the mash bill. It's 48% corn, 46% rye, 3% malted barley, and 3% malted rye. So this is technically more rye than it is bourbon, but it is kind of a boo rye, if you will, because it's not a full 51% of anything. Comes in at 114.6 proof, and yeah, this is the barrel strength version. It is non-age stated, so it's not exactly obvious how old this is, but I would think that for a yearly release, this is at least probably 6 to 8 years. But let's crack into this thing and get it. It's 2 Minute Tuesday, tasting notes, and a review. So a little precursor. Checking out the website, this is age stated at 6 years, and the barrel strength versus non-barrel strength have completely different mash bills. So the barrel strength being that 48 corn, 46 rye, 3% malted barley, and 3% malted rye, so basically a slightly rye-heavy kind of boo rye, versus the non-barrel strength, which comes at 94 proof, is 58 corn, 37 rye, 2% malted rye, and 3% malted barley. So it technically could be considered a bourbon by mash bill, but it is considered a blend of straight whiskeys. So somewhere in the blend, not everything is bourbon, and thus it is not a bourbon. So with that being said, let's get into our tasting notes on 2 Minute Tuesday of the Penelope FCancer. Got a pretty decent standard bourbon color, which you would kind of expect out of a 6-year. It is a shade lighter, kind of yellowish. Viscosity-wise, got a few legs coming in through here, but nothing too crazy, which you could kind of expect out of a 6-year whiskey. Let's get on the nose. Immediately on the nose, I definitely can get the rye spice, and for me, I am particularly sensitive to rye in that it almost always comes out as a very minty note, and that is definitely present here, but it's not the only thing coming in, and a lot of times in most straight ryes, that's all I smell is mint. So what we got is kind of mint with a little bit of cream, almost like a mint ice cream kind of thing going on. There's definitely some other sweetness, probably like a brown sugary kind of thing going on, but it's really dominated by that Swedish cream note, and especially that mint note. There's also a little hint desserty cinnamon thing that's kind of going on, so hopefully some of that transfers to the palate. So let's find out what's on the palate. I actually don't get that mint at first. I do get that kind of sweet cream, almost ice creamy thing forward, and then the mint kind of comes in, and I would say it is very much like mint ice cream. And that's kind of interesting because usually it's more toothpastey mint for me in rye. So having this more ice creamy kind of thing, there's a little bit of that brown sugar coming in. I'm stuck on the ice cream part, but you've ever had that kind of cookie batter thing, or the brown butter cookie kind of stuff that they do in ice cream? There's very much some of that present. There's also a really lovely little bit of mix of both pepper and cinnamon and sugar kind of going on. So with that kind of brown sugar, you got some cinnamon in there, a little bit of pepper that adds a little oomph to it. The other thing that's kind of starting to come forward that I really like is inside that pepper and that kind of spice mixture is that savory side that I'm used to from MGP, where you get that little bit of sweet tobacco, a little bit of leather that's kind of complementing and uplifting the spice portion. So you get this kind of dessert thing up front, and it shifts a little. It comes a little bit more savory for the end of the pour, and it's lingering surprisingly well, despite not seeming super oily on the glass. So let's get an overall score on the Penelope FCancer barrel strength version. I'm gonna give this thing a 79. I'm actually really surprised by this. I think it's a lot better than most people would have expected, and I can see why the previous years of this have been highly sought after and chased. It's really surprisingly good. I was expecting, considering we've had 2 other monster Penelope bottles this year, for this to be the one that goes okay, bring it back down a little bit because it's only 6 years, but this is actually punching way above its 6-year aging. And the blend work that's been done here, and probably Takes participation, has made a actually surprisingly good whiskey. This was $121 shipped. Then that includes all your taxes and all that kind of good stuff through Shared Pour for me when I purchased it. And honestly, I think it's punching at about that kind of weight. Is this nearly as good as the Omega or the Founders? No, but it's a very different ride. And as far as rye forward whiskey is concerned, this is actually doing a really good job because it's bringing this really interesting ride. It's a little sweet and desserty up front, and then it kind of shifts into the things that I would associate with a standard bourbon out of MGP and Penelope, which is that kind of savory leather, tobacco, and spices. profile. So being able to kind of go on that ride where it's like, oh, it's kind of sweet and interesting and minty, and then it curveballs me a little bit and goes into a different direction. That makes this an interesting ride. And that's why I'm bringing its score up to that point instead of leaving it kind of closer in the low 70s. I think that ride justifies the extra points on this one. So 3 bottles so far that Penelope has had of special releases that we've done all in a row, and every single one of them has been very good. Very good. So Penelope is kicking butt at the tail end of the year and showing that they can be a little bit more of the marquee side of MGP and present these very interesting high-end special release or allocated type releases that I think can challenge a lot of the other portions of the market. And that is good for us because, in theory, having more and more of these things coming out means that, 1, other whiskey makers have to keep being original and interesting, or 2, their product has to become more and more available because the hype behind their allocations might not drive as much as it used to when you could potentially get something like the FCancer bottle, like the Omega, like the Founders. And these things are coming in at, while higher prices than, say, what we probably want to pay, was like, maybe $60 a bottle. It's still in a range that's not crazy, especially if you consider like secondary markets for things like stags and things like that have been very high in the past, and they're starting to come back down to earth, which is nice, but these things are competing at that level with their own profile. So if you like this profile, which I'm a big fan of MGP, I'm just gonna be honest here, this gives you something that is a little different, but still familiar at an elevated level, despite only being 6 years. There's gotta be older whiskey in this mix, right? It's the typical thing. The youngest whiskey is the one that defines the age statement. There has to be something that's older in here just based on how much flavor it's delivering and things like that, but it's age stated 6 years, and if at 6 years it can deliver that much flavor, that's hunt worthy. There may be some of these still available on some of the websites like Bourbon Alfred or Shared Pour, all those kind of places, but if not, I haven't seen these go for crazy amounts on secondary. They're typically in the like 175 to 200 range. And at that, I don't know that I would pay that much, but if you get one in a trade and you're okay with that kind of trade and you're getting kind of some value compared to MSRP that you paid on something, then that might be worth it to get this one because it is a really, really interesting ride. And now it makes me wonder what the non-barrel strength version is like. Gang, I really hope you have enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear from you down below. Have you tried the previous or current edition of the FCancer bottles? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Are you a big fan of Penelope? Do you not like Penelope at all? Also want to hear that in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. When we hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to give away a bottle of E.H. Taylor Single Barrel, along with a few other things. On that whole like, comment, subscribe thing, those are the 3 easy, free ways to help us small whiskey tube type channels continue to grow and make it so that we don't have to take crazy sponsorships like shoving cereal and mattresses down your throat. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.